Good morning. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Sitting in room 9 in City Hall. Friday in summer, so things are a little bit slower, but there's never a dull moment during election season in New York City.
Ethan, what I try to do with my Friday guests is sort of do an end of week recap, sort of a lightning round, biggest news, biggest winners, biggest losers. So let's start there. Let's start with what were the biggest shocks or biggest. I know the lawsuit, right? The federal lawsuit on sanctuary and the mayor, whether he responded late, soon, whatever. But I leave that to you to sort of weigh in on your thoughts on that. So let's start with the biggest news of the week, in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's recency bias, but I would say this Trump administration lawsuit over the city's sanctuary city policies seeming to be aimed at overturning them in the wake of this shooting of a Customs and Border Patrol agent in Upper Manhattan earlier, or actually it was last Saturday. And Homeland Security, they say that the perpetrators were both undocumented immigrants. So they've used that as sort of a pretext to go after the city's sanctuary laws, which is something that have long been in their crosshairs. Of course, for Mayor Adams, this puts him in quite an awkward position. He has spent the better part of a year now warming up to Trump. They've developed this kind of cozy relationship, very unusual for a Democratic mayor, and it has seemed to keep Trump at arm's length in some ways for a while in terms of going after the city super aggressively. But now I think we're seeing the end of that. Maybe that relationship has only gone so far, and further puts Adams in this position where he has to talk about how, I'm pushing back on the administration here and here, but I work with them in other ways. It's all very like kind of muddled and strange coming from him. So this further complicates his situation, I think.
Ethan, let's talk a little bit about the former Governor Cuomo and what are the new anything stand out to you about his new reinvigorated campaign?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely, and I don't think he's the only one trying to do this. You're seeing a lot of centrist Democrats trying to take a page out of Zoran Mamdani's playbook that worked so well for him during the primary, doing way more vertical videos on social media, walking and talking through different neighborhoods in New York City. Cuomo's videos are showing him, he's in Co-op City, going into local businesses up there, trying different kinds of food, talking about, housing policy. He is really trying to, I guess, reinvent himself as a more social media friendly candidate. During the primary, he was very much using this rose garden strategy where he didn't really interact with the public all that much. He eventually started going out more, but it was like on a flatbed truck going through neighborhoods. It was almost a very suburban style of campaigning. So you can see now he's like really trying to emphasize more. I'm talking to people on the street. I'm with the people. I'm meeting people where they are, and that's definitely something that he said he wants to do more of. Of course, his campaign still is not putting out public daily schedules. The reporters don't know where he is a lot of the time. But at least in terms of trying to put out the image that he's meeting people where they are more, that's definitely something that they've been focusing on. And I would say rhetorically, he doesn't sound all that different. I mean, he's kind of hitting the same points about Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee, not being experienced enough, his policies being unrealistic, and that Cuomo, who was governor for 11 years and has spent 30 something years in government, has the knowledge when it comes to policy to really like lead this city in a moment where people need someone who can ease the affordability crisis.
Ethan, talk a little bit about the Zoran campaign and he's back from Uganda, obviously, but what are you hearing from that front? I know there was a lot of meetings with the business community to sort of allay their fears, and the world's not going to end if I win. What are you hearing in terms of recent conversations around the campaign? I know there's been some personnel changes there. What else are you hearing from Team Zoran, or information and or intel?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he had two high-profile meetings with business leaders last week, organized by the Partnership for New York City and Tech NYC, and one was with, I believe it was around 100 CEOs who, have been skeptical of Zoran because of his policy proposal to raise taxes on the wealthy, and also with the tech leaders. But yeah, the CEOs were the ones that he was a little bit more, he had to try to win over. And it seemed like he kind of got mixed results coming out of that meeting. But he did moderate his stance on the phrase globalize the intifada, which many Jews, consider to be incitement to violence against Jewish people. And that was something that came out of one of those meetings. He did not change his stance on, how much he wants to raise taxes on corporations and on the wealthy. That's something he's holding firm on. I forget where this came out of, but he did say that he might be willing to change his stance on his rent freeze policy after his first term, given if he gets a first term and gets reelected. And then he also had a meeting with Leader Jeffries in the House, and Jeffries did not come out of that meeting and endorse Zoran. And actually, listening to your conversation with Peter Stern on my way in, I was thinking about, oh well, he said if Jeffries doesn't do it now, he's probably never going to do it. And I think Peter was probably right about that. I think Jeffries might just sit this one out at this point. It's been over a month, or about a month, since the primary, and he hasn't endorsed yet. He met with Zoran and he hasn't endorsed. I don't know where that's going to go. It doesn't seem like he's jumping in with both feet. Governor Hochul and Senate Minority Leader Schumer are also kind of holding their powder. So I think that whole thing remains to be seen. Personnel changes. Politico reported that Zoran's campaign has brought on a bunch of kind of national DNC veterans to run his communications operation and go into more strategy positions. Dora Pekek, who was the press secretary for Brad Lander during the primary, and she also kind of came from national campaigns, is now going to be his press secretary. So you can see he's kind of trying to reposition himself to win over more of these moderate Democrats, build a bigger tent going into the general election. And it's a very hard, coalition to manage. The Democratic Party is a huge tent. Zoran comes from the very far left and has to win over people that are very skeptical of the far left. So I guess remains to be seen how successful he'll be. But so far, he's pulled endorsements from some big, institutional Democrats, Adriana Espaillat, Ranis Bichat, Carmellen. He's definitely, I think, managing it well so far.
Ethan, who are you hearing is the Zoran Brain Trust? Based on your coverage and all the people you talk to, because you're a reporter, you get calls from pollsters, you get calls from campaign managers, from surrogates, you get them all. So come on, spill the beans here.
Yeah, I think I'm also hearing, a lot of former de Blasio people, and he still has his DSA and WFP, the more progressive flank. Yeah, those are the people that he's been surrounding himself with. It does seem like he's taking a lot of meetings with different people as he's moved into the general election, which, I think is very smart. He's taken the strategy of not, closing himself off. He's really been open to talking to anyone and, building that bigger tent, expanding his coalition.
Ethan, let's talk about your neighbors in the city council. What are you hearing out of the council? I know the budget's done. It's quiet, but there's another game that's going to begin soon if it hasn't started already. And what are you hearing? And I'm referring to the speaker's race.
Yes, yes. This is quiet season for the council this summer. Yeah, I mean, I think the big names out there right now are Amanda Farias, who's the current Democratic Majority Leader, who kind of seemed like she was put in that position as setting her up to be the next speaker. Crystal Hudson, who's progressive from Brooklyn, and Julie Menon, who's on the Upper East Side. Those are the three big names that I've heard. And, I don't think the race is going to be in full swing until the general election shakes out. Obviously, Crystal Hudson would be the one who's ideologically the closest to Zoran Mamdani. And, I believe you talked about this on your last conversation as well. The mayor always does try to exert influence over the speaker's race and get the person who I guess they believe would be the most ideologically aligned with them. Eric Adams unsuccessfully tried to do it with Francisco Moya, ended up with Adrian Adams, who I think he thought maybe would also be amenable, and turned out they ended up butting heads quite a bit. So, but I think like no matter who out of those three Mamdani ends up with, I don't think any of them are going to be necessarily very antagonistic towards him. This is a pretty left-leaning city council in general as it stands. And I don't think that's going to change all that much with the new members coming in. So it'll be an interesting race. I mean, often that race kind of happens at the Somos conference down in Puerto Rico, because that takes place just days after the general election. There's a lot of horse trading and wheeling and dealing going on there.
Ethan, what do you think of the collateral damage of the races? I know that there's conversations around Gonzalez Rojas challenging Jessica Ramos. Anything else you're hearing in terms of repercussions of who endorsed who and who went in what direction? Obviously, fully understanding that there's still a lot of time left on the clock, and November's still a long way away, and anything can happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess another potential challenge that's been floated is Brad Lander challenging Dan Goldman. Of course, Brad Lander also seems to be a top, he's in mind as a Zoran Mamdani administration pick. I think, you talked about in the last podcast, again, I believe his name is Ian. Is it Ian or Ian Huntley in Bed-Stuy, challenging Stephanie Zinnerman. I mean, I think the Justin Brannan potentially challenging Nicole Malliotakis, which has kind of been floated in the past, is coming up again after Brannan unsuccessfully ran for comptroller. Yeah, I mean, things get pretty ugly during the election, and there could be more of that, or definitely will be more of that during the general election. I mean, yeah, I think this alliance between Brad Lander and Zoran Mamdani is really like such a big, important thing for the race for both of them that came out of the general election. So I guess that was more of a positive relationship than a negative one. I mean, obviously, Jessica Ramos has seemed to completely damage her brand with progressives, even though she was already kind of trending in that direction anyway. But that decision to endorse Cuomo seems like it completely tarnished her reputation. I guess simply because she was such a big critic of his and ran on that, and then seemed to do a heel turn on it in a moment. Yeah, so I think those are kind of the big things coming out of it. I mean, I was surprised to see someone like Rodneyse, who's who's butted heads with progressives quite a bit as Brooklyn Democratic Party chair. I mean, she spent years like trying to put down movements of progressives to take over more of the Brooklyn Democratic Party. I was surprised to see her go with Mamdani so quickly. But, maybe people are, I mean, I think she saw maybe this is the way the winds are blowing now. The Democratic Party in New York City, at least, may be moving more in Zoran Mamdani's direction and away from the establishment that we've known.
So, Ethan, talk a little bit about the winners for the week. And coming who were the winners? I know everyone talks Lander. Who are some of the other big winners in the week, and who are the biggest the people that, again, losers, if you know, if you may.
Yeah, yeah. Coming out, I mean, I guess the primary, I would say the Working Families Party and the Dream Movement, the Don't Rank Evil Andrew Cuomo campaign, they really succeeded in, I forget exactly how the data shook out, but they were kind of proudly sharing it earlier this week that they were very successful in getting voters not to put Andrew Cuomo on their ranked choice ballots. So that was definitely a big success. And then the Working Families Party, you know, they put out this slate that included Mamdani, included other progressives like Lander and Adrian Adams and Zellner Myrie. I was also seemingly very successful. So they definitely came out of the primary as winners, in my opinion. Winners of the week. I mean, I think Zoran Mamdani, and we could start with that. He put out a very savvy video, as he's wont to do, before he jetted off to Uganda, his home country, kind of preempting New York Post headlines and making fun of him for leaving, or, you know, dunking on him for leaving the city during this time, and came up with a bunch of kind of funny posty type headlines. So, you know, that just kind of shows the intelligence of the Mamdani campaign, that they kind of get ahead of these things. And, you know, I mean, those stories were still written anyway, and there was still plenty of dunking on him for leaving, but, you know, it's better to get ahead of it. I mean, I would say loser would be Mayor Adams for this huge lawsuit. I think after spending so much time cultivating this relationship with the Trump administration, this is definitely not what he wanted. It's not a good look to be dealing with this. I mean, obviously, he himself is not the biggest fan of the city's sanctuary laws, and has constantly talked about wanting to tweak them to make it easier to go after migrants who are accused of crimes, not just those who are convicted of crimes. And, you know, he's kind of in this awkward position with this lawsuit. But yeah, I would, you know, I know Eric Adams has suffered a lot of losses lately, but I think, you know, that counts.
Ethan, let's move over to the state now. First, let's start with Mike Lawler saying, "Hey, I'm not in this," and now Richie Torres is not in this. Does this essentially mean that Governor Hochul just walks right into another term? I don't think the politics right now are leaning. The winds are not blowing in the direction of Elise Stefanik. That's for sure. At least that's the sense I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, what role does Antonio Delgado play in this primary with Hochul? Does anybody really know who he is? Does he have the juice? You know, he put out when he launched his campaign about, I guess it was a month ago, maybe a bit more, put out, like, you know, kind of a slick video, but I didn't really feel like there was a clear message there. So yeah, it remains to be seen if Hochul's really going to see much of a challenge from him, if anybody else is going to jump into the Democratic primary. Like you said, Richie Torres, at first it seemed like he was going to be a big challenge to Hochul, and now it seems like he's completely backed off of the idea of running. And yeah, Stefanik, I mean, she may just be too right-leaning. You know, again, even though it's a statewide election, New York City is still where most of the vote comes from. So I think Governor Hochul is in a strong position. And actually, she's been very smart about some of her stances during the Trump era. She's kind of full-throatedly defended congestion pricing, which, you know, was a big change from last year, where she put it on pause for several months while trying to assess, I guess, how to go forward with it, when she was worried that its unpopularity would endanger House races outside the city where Democrats are trying to flip seats. And yeah, she's pushed back on Trump in a lot of ways, but while also being open to talking to him and working with him, which I think, that's been a smart strategy. I guess, not to bring it back to the city, but I guess her stance on Zoran Mamdani could also play a big role, especially when it comes to the suburbs. How much does she embrace him? So far, she's kind of taken the tact of Hakeem Jeffries of keeping him at arm's length, saying, well, I'm meeting with him. I respect his, win. I'm going to defend him from Trump's attacks, but I'm not going to endorse him. And also, she's been pretty firm about not wanting to raise taxes at all, even on the wealthy. So that's going to be a big point of contention between the two of them, potentially.
Ethan, what are you working on? Let's talk about week ahead now. What do we need to be on the lookout? What are things you're on the lookout for in this upcoming week?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're gonna, see what the fallout is from this federal lawsuit. Mayor Adams continues to hit the campaign trail. Just going to be looking out to see if there are more endorsements in store for him. He got endorsements last week from several law enforcement unions, notably not the Police Benevolent Association, which is the biggest NYPD rank and file union. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna keep looking out for him, being out and about. Andrew Cuomo as well. Hopefully, they'll start telling reporters where he's going to be, and and Curtis Lewa, keeping track of the whole mayoral field. Yeah, I mean, summer's a bit of a quieter time, and of course, with Mamdani gone, I guess we'll see if they try to take advantage of the vacuum of Mamdani being gone. Eric Adams put out a video yesterday, kind of making fun of Mamdani for leaving, but then also kind of making fun of himself because he's a known jet setter who's gone on many trips as mayor. And then a big thing, kind of connected to the sanctuary laws is the developing, continuing to develop situation at 26 Federal Plaza where migrants are going to their mandated court dates and then getting snatched by ICE agents right afterwards. And the city, the news outlet, the city did some great reporting on a video showing like very poor conditions on the 10th floor of that building where several migrants, well, actually dozens, are being held each day. And, seeing where that situation goes. I mean, Mayor Adams' administration did send a letter to the feds, kind of saying, we want to know what's going on here. This floor needs to be inspected. So I guess we'll see if that really turns into anything. Immigration is definitely going to continue to be a pretty thorny issue for Mayor Adams. It's weirdly been one of the defining issues of his tenure in office.
Ethan, thank you so much for your time. And I usually try to keep this at around 15-20 minute range and to get the biggest news stories out and conversations around them. So again, I thank you again for this. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll do this again soon. All right.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much for having me on.